Hello everyone and welcome to a new Let's Play of Cauldrons of War, Eastern Front 1941, Barbarossa and beyond. A game which came out a couple of months ago, at least it was, it's in early access, like all games nowadays. Oh well, doesn't matter. I think this game is interesting enough to play as it is, instead of waiting for another 5 months or more for the final version. So, this game is pretty similar to Decisive Campaigns Barbarossa, I would think, at least a little bit. But it mostly deals with, or almost only deals with, the strategic aspect of it. And there's not that much tactical elements involved. It deals with Barbarossa on a very large scale, as if you would be, you know, kind of playing as Braukic or Halder, in the sense that you don't get to make the decisions of which division goes where and things like that. But yeah, I don't think so on a larger scale. So this is a pretty small game. It's, I believe, made by a single developer, as far as I'm aware of. It was pretty cheap, so it was, I think, like $4.99 on Steam. So I think, seeing that, you can kind of know what to expect. It's going to be a bit of a smaller game, a bit less streamlined, but still fun nonetheless. So let's get right into it and just immediately see what this is all about. Let's play as Germans, as we are wont to do. Normal, Operation Barbarossa. There's also different scenarios like Operation Typhoon and the Moscow counteroffensive, but we're not going to concern ourselves with that for now. And let's launch the game soon. Now, before I start here, I have to say that I have not had that much time with this game for now. So I've just been fiddling around a little bit just to get to the basics right, to actually know a little bit what I'm doing, but I don't have any extensive information on how to play this game so far. So it's somewhat of a blind run, in the sense that I have not completed a campaign yet. I played like a few turns, but not a lot actually. Anyway, Barbarossa, June till December 1941. One of the most gigantic military operations of all time has just begun. The Wehrmacht attacks an adversary, taken completely by surprise, but will soon discover that it has seriously underestimated the combativeness of its adversary, its capacity to mobilize its population, and its formidable industrial apparatus. Never error of appreciation will have been so costly in human lives. In Berlin, the mood of the population is gloomy. While the war against England drags on, fresh fruits are becoming scarce in the stalls, and even beer is now limited. Soon all these little problems will quickly be forgotten, because in the east, secretly, the troops are occupying their combat positions for the most exciting of crusades. In a few moments, Operation Barbarossa will begin, and the Wehrmacht will rush east to conquer the living space necessary for the German people. Let's launch. The enemy is caught completely off guard as waves of planes strafe and bombard its airfields. Along the 1,200 kilometers of the front, 6 armies and 4 armored groups sweep over an unprepared enemy. The following objectives will give you victory points. Take Moscow, control the Baltic, connect with the Finns on the Svir River, take Kiev and Kharkov, take Odessa and Sevastopol, take Rostov, and annihilate the Red Army. That's 1 point then. So the most important still are Moscow, I would say Leningrad then, indeed, for control of the Baltic. And then connecting with the Finns on the Svir River is an additional point. So that's actually separate. So with the connection of the Finns does not automatically mean control of the Baltic, I would say. Okay. The game will end on January 1st, 1942. Historically, the Germans have won only 2 points. You will need at least 6 points to win the game. Yeah, so because they didn't take Moscow, they didn't take Leningrad or control the Baltic. Also the Iranian-bound pocket. But I wonder if that's in this game, actually. I would be surprised if they did, but maybe. Connect with the Finns. So, yeah, that makes sense then. They didn't do that. Take Kiev and Kharkov. This they did. Take Odessa and Sevastopol. So they didn't take Sevastopol. Didn't take Rostov, or they did take it, but then they lost it again. And they didn't annihilate the Red Army, whatever that means. Kommissarbevel. Political commissars are the backbone of the Red Army. These fanatics are adversaries unlike the others. I guess this question mark is for the U with the dots on it. I don't even know how you say that in English. Yeah, no clue actually. Huh. Anyway, we know this the Führer. So the Führer said, in the fight against Bolshevism, one cannot count on the enemy to behave according to the principles of humanity or to the law of nations. We should expect, in particular political commissars of all types, as true bearers of resistance, that they treat our prisoners with hatred, cruelty, and inhumanity. We should probably reserve some special treatment for these commissars. Right, so the way it works in this game is that if you take certain decisions, they might raise your brutality meter. And once that brutality meter hits a certain point, I believe it's like 15, 20, and 30 or something. Not 100% sure, but once it reaches a certain point, the Soviets become harder to wipe out because they will fight harder not to get captured because they know that they're going to be treated badly. Whereas if you keep that brutality meter lower, they, in theory, at least according to this game, they will be easier to beat because they are less fearful of being captured because they think that their treatment will be reasonable. You would expect, of course, that if you choose an option which gives you less brutality, which is a plus, you will get a negative, or you'll get a penalty in another field. So, for example, in the first turn, after the first turn, you will get the option to deal with the pogroms in Kaunas. And then you have 3 options with different degrees of increasing your barbarism. With, of course, certain penalties or certain benefits according to which outcome you choose. But for the first one, if you choose they'll be shot, that will just give you barbarism, but they'll be treated like the others does not give you any barbarism. There's also no negative effect. So they will be treated like the others is always the best choice here. Like there's no reason why you should choose they will be shot. From a gameplay perspective, if you would be playing this solely from a role-playing perspective, I can understand why you would choose they'll be shot because that just fits into your roleplay. But I believe you get 2 barbarism for they'll be shot, but I'm going to say they will be treated like the others because I know that there's no penalty there. After considering it very seriously, the Führer ultimately did not sign the Kommissarbevel he was planning, feared that this order would push the enemy to massacre our captured soldiers in retaliation, weighed heavily in this decision. Let's hope that his weakness will not turn against us. And we start out June 22nd, 941. So the way this works is that for each of the theaters or army groups, you get a certain mission. And for each mission, basically you're working towards that goal. You can see what your mission is by clicking on these respective, for example, arrows, or in this case, the cauldron here. And this thing is, you still have to choose your mode of advance, basically. So if you were to say, click on this arrow, because you want to click on the arrow, that's the mission. You'll see here what our mission is. The first objective here is the Baltic Offensive, which we completed 0% of because we haven't done anything. Beyond the Niemen River, extend the Baltic states. The objective of this offensive is to break through to the Russian city of Pskov, liberating the Baltic states from the Soviet yoke, opening the Leningrad route, and depriving the Soviet fleet of precious ports on the Baltic. The Swedish iron would thus arrive to Germany without disturbances. That's our objective over in the north. Then we can see which armies and or Panzergruppen we have assigned to it. We have, well, naturally the 18th, the 16th, and the 4th Panzer Group. Just as much as you would expect. And then for the Russians, of course, we have 8th, 27th, 11th, etc., etc. So you can see which forces are assigned to a certain mission, as you will, And these forces are assigned to, these Soviet forces are also assigned to this mission. And then if you are playing as the Soviets, you're trying to prevent the Germans from reaching this objective. If you, let's just go back for a second here. So if you click on your units, you can basically assign them a certain task. For example, if I click on the 18th Army, I can say that I want the 18th Army to assault. If I click on a Russian unit, I can say what I would want to be done to a particular Russian unit or to all Russian units in that particular mission or theater. So for example, I click the 27th Army, I can do air bombardment on the 27th Army specifically, aerial recon. I can choose to do air superiority in this region by itself. That counts for all of this. You can see this here, up here. Currently, air superiority is disputed. So neither side has air superiority at this point. We can attack their airfields, and we can do strategic suppression. We can see in the actions wiki what each of these things does, what kind of effect it potentially has. But that's what you do if you click on the Soviet forces. Whereas if you click on your forces, you can see what you can do to them. For example, I can make the 16th entrench. I can put them in reserve. I can split the army. I can start shelling with artillery. I can send them to a different mission, the road to Minsk in this case. Usually you can assign it only to adjacent units or adjacent objectives. If I were to want to assign, for example, the 16th Army to Army Group South, I would have to put the 16th Army in reserve first. Then I have to send it to high reserve. Or I don't know specifically how you call it, but I would have to completely recall it afterwards. Then I have to ship it to the Army Group Center. Then I have to ship it to Army Group South. Then from Army Group South, I have to assign it to a certain mission. So that would take quite a while. It takes a lot to get this assigned. But you could technically do that if you wanted to. Anyway, yeah, so these are all the things you can do. Again, you have the actions wiki here. Now, we have the 18th Army assigned. And there are a couple of things that you can see over here and up here that are very important. Let's start up here. The command points, 5. This score represents the capacity of your front or army group command. Actions consume command points. If several of your operations depend on the same front or the same army group, you will need to manage your command points carefully because they will be common to both operations. What does it mean? Well, say that we complete the first mission, the Baltic Offensive, then we will get 2 separate missions that split off from it. Because, well, we'll have one operation that will go through Estonia towards Tallinn, and we'll have, that will be the first one, and then we'll have another one which will mean that we'll, I believe it's up to the Luga line. So then we'll try to break the Luga line in the second objective. So then we'll have 2 of them, and we'll have five command points for 2 operations instead of 1. That's what it means. Front width indicates the number of armies it would take to effectively hold this front. Having fewer units on the front lines in the score will make your lines true colanders and prevent your forces from defending effectively. And your forces will show that as well. Maximum rail capacity. Whatever the logistical capacity of a front or an army group, it will never exceed that permitted by the rail and road network of the theater of operations. This score represents the maximum local logistical capacity. So at the start of each turn, each of your units will get free fuel and ammunition, but only as much as the rail capacity allows. So this rail capacity of 3 will allow 3 of my units, and I believe they are chosen at random. So if I had a 4th, say that I would bring up a corps, which I can, because in my army group reserve, for example, currently I have the 23rd Corps, 101 security corps, and a police regiment. Say that I would bring up one of these and put them to the front. Then I have 4 out of 3, and 3 out of those 4 would be randomly chosen to get additional supplies. But now they would all get 1 fuel, 1 ammo. It's always 1 for free. Now technically you can also call your unit to reserve, and if you put it in reserve, you can have an additional action, and I don't know if it actually says that here. Yeah, here, supply actions, refit. Then, here, this action refits a unit placed in reserve or before an operation is launched. You can also do it. Lorries or rail transport points will be consumed and the unit will see its ranks replenished if there are reserves. It will also receive supplies and regain cohesion points. And you can technically see that if you click here on Armed Group North, you see that they have... It says trucks, but this is actually infantry. That's actually a bug. It has 6 infantry reserves. It has 8 aviation power, as you will, for each turn. Which can diminish, of course, if you fight with the Soviet air power. It has 75 trucks available. It has no tank reserves and no artillery reserves. And for Army Group Center, it is obviously different. Like they have 10 infantry reserves and stuff like that. So, but you would have to pull them away from the front and put them in reserve. Now, if you have only one unit in a certain area, you can't put your unit in reserve, because if it's the only unit holding the front, they can't be pulled all the way back, which you can quite imagine. Like if you have only the 4th Panzer Group trying to assault Leningrad, then you can't put the 4th Panzer in reserve because there's nothing to hold your front. So you can't do it if it's the only unit, and it's much easier for the Soviets to put units in reserve because they just naturally have more forces. I haven't even been playing yet. Yeah, even for a game as small as this, there's a lot of explanation, but that's fine. Alright, so that's that. We have the rail capacity, we talked about that. This is the air superiority, which I talked about already. Now we can see here what this unit has in its composition. The 18th Army has a bunch of tanks, well, 1 in tank power, 6 artillery, it has 15 trucks, and the more trucks a unit has, it improves its mobility, reduces its supply cost, and help determine the maximum progress possible during operations. We'll talk about that later. The more trucks, the better. Yes, indeed. And then they have 7 infantry and or cavalry. In this case, it's the main component of armies, but you can understand that Panzer Group of 4 has less of these because they have a lot more tanks. At least in this game. Alright. Next up, we have the general skills. Basically, it goes from 5 to 0, and 5 stars is a very good general. 0 stars is the absolute worst. You can see there, I'm not going to read all of those, but you can see here 5 stars, this general represents the pinnacle of military competence. 0 stars, this general sees nothing wrong with attacking without artillery preparation. Yeah, exactly. So you can get the gist of it. Cohesion and experience. The number of hearts represents the cohesion and morale of this army. The closer it is to 0, the closer the army is to a stampede. The other symbol indicates the experience of this army. The clover representing a unit of inexperienced greens. The tile representing seasoned units, and the spade hardened veterans. You can expect for most of the German units, not all of them, but for quite a few of them, to be seasoned veterans, whereas a lot of the Soviet forces, as you can see here, are actually greens. Not all of them. They actually do have, especially within their mechanized corps, they might have actually some tiles or indeed even spades there, but not here. Then we'll have fuel. If you want to move, this generally costs fuel. You can have a maximum of 2 fuel and 2 ammo. Above that, it won't get resupplied. When stocks are at 0, a motorized army can no longer move or attack, nor can it defend itself at full power. Sometimes, however, a general will continue to operate using expedients such as abandoning some vehicles and siphoning their tanks to progress at a high cost with a handful of tanks. Yeah. Ammunition represents the ammunition stock of this army. When the stock is at 0, its effectiveness in combat is strongly limited. We consider that there is still ammunition, but that they are very limited. For example, artillery can be limited to 2 shells per day, which is what the Germans had, I believe, at some point when they were in front of Moscow. They got so little ammunition that some of the artillery was only allowed to fire 2 shells a day. It's kind of silly. A surrounded army without ammunition will tend to surrender. Yeah. So you want to try and keep your units at least in decent supply, but that kind of stuff, it's pretty tricky actually, I think. Alright, so we've talked about all that. Let's just get started here, because I do want to get into some action here. So let's just start with Army Group North. And I'm just gonna do some airfield attacks at start. And let's actually read out what that does as well, because I do think it's important to, or interesting to read that for the first time. So we'll go to air power, airfield attacks. The Soviet air fleet is large enough to cause German problems throughout the campaign if it is not quickly mastered. Air attacks on airfields are available to the Axis at the start of Barbarossa. It makes it possible to target Soviet airfields by surprise and destroy a large part of their aircraft fleet at the start of the campaign. I think it's generally a good idea to do airfield attacks at the start, because we get we get kills, but it doesn't cost us planes. So I will also only read once what happens here, because these results are generally the same. Waves of German planes are unleashed on the crowded Soviet aerodromes, with AA absent or surprised. In a carnage, the few planes that could take off are shut down in flight. Will the Soviet Air Force be able to recover from this disaster? We'll see. At any rate, I also want air superiority, because it's currently disputed, but it will benefit us if we can actually get air superiority here. Wave after wave, young Soviet pilots are shot down by veterans of the Luftwaffe. The results are not long in coming. The Red Wings are chased from the sky. So we have air superiority now, which puts our losses to 1 plane. And the URSS, 3 planes. We have air superiority. That's great. You might be tempted to immediately lurch your pantsers forward, but that's not what I'm going to do. I'm just going to use the 18th and the 16th Army first in an assault. Also note, I cannot actually select which enemy unit I want to attack. That's actually... It's not completely random, because there are certain factors that make it more likely that your troops will attack a certain other unit. For example, if the enemy unit is surrounded, for example, or it's in a cauldron, it will be more likely that it will get attacked. But yeah, it's actually random. I believe the way they say it in the game is that your armies don't get to choose who's in front of them. So, like, depending on the position of the 16th Army on the front, it might be the 27th Army that's in front of them, the 11th Army that's in front of them. They can't shift and go away to attack the 27th Army. That's physically impossible. So, you know, in this case, the NKVD border guards are in front of them, and so they attack that. And let's actually go to the log to read that. Sometimes it's up to the infantry to do the job. A violent assault has just started. A violent artillery barrage opens the way for assault groups. The defender's lines break down at several points, his losses being very significant. The NKVD border guards has ceased to exist. I captured some trucks, so that's always nice. I'm not sure if they just got in there or whether they go into the reserve. Let's actually take a look, because it was 75, so I think they actually get added to the army, but I would have to check that back in the video. Let me actually put that down, because I think it will be interesting to actually check back for future episodes. I'm just going to note that, so I know what to check in the video itself. So I attacked with the 16th Army, and with the 16th Army that basically only costed 1 ammunition, even though it shows here that it supposedly also cost a fuel, so that's a bit weird. But let's assault with the 18th Army as well. Also note, it did not cost us any cohesion, but it can actually cost you cohesion if you attack. Okay, we also got some progress of the operation last time. I didn't say that before. Usually at some point, if you get this higher up, it also shows you a certain amount of text. The defenders' tanks, strongly pressed and cut off from infantry support, were forced to yield ground. The offensive goes on. The defenders' line break down at several points, his losses being very significant. The offensive goes on. The defender threw his armored vehicles into the battle. Without support and without inspiration, the battlefield has turned into a dumping ground for smoking carcasses. Many soldiers have surrendered and impressive columns of prisoners have been driven to makeshift camps. The 12th Mechanized Corps is routed. Its heavy equipment has been destroyed and abandoned on site. Soviet lost 2 tanks, 2 infantry. These guys lost 4 cohesion and progress is 7. So we're now at 13. Yeah, so both of these have attacked. And I think that besides that, we probably also want to do a breakthrough with the 4th Panzer. And you can see that 4th Panzer Group is now both isolated, because it has broken through enemy lines or because it has retreated slower than the enemy was advancing. If nothing is done, the unit could find itself surrounded. Yeah, and it has exposed flanks. By attacking or piercing, this army has lost contact with the neighboring armies. As a result, its flanks are exposed and the enemy will gain bonuses when attacking it. But we killed the 11th army. The 11th army has ceased to exist. We captured 2 trucks from them, so they're now at 22 instead of 20, I think. Yeah. And fuel deposits have fallen into attackers' hands, +1 refueling. So we still have 2 fuel and only 1 ammunition now. Let's go back to that log, because after we've reached a certain amount of percentage, they actually have a little bit of text here. The Niemen has been crossed, and the enemy will try to block our way from Riga to Šiauliai. We must destroy them before they take refuge behind the Dvina. Progress in this case was 25%. We have no more points, so we cannot do anything anymore for the north. Let's continue on with the center, where our mission is the road to Minsk. The fortified Molotov line and the old fortress of Brest-Litovsk should not resist long, opening the road to Minsk. The front here makes a salient, inviting attack on the 10th Soviet Army. We have a few elements here that make things difficult for us. The Pripyat Marsh. This vast wetland literally cuts the front in 2. This difficult terrain prevents the central and southern fronts from reinforcing each other, and the partisans and fugitives who take refuge in the zone pose a constant threat to the flanks of the German armies. There are also fortifications here. A line of hard fortifications, prepared in advance, defends this part of the front. The attacker will find it difficult to pierce it, so that's the Stalin line. Defense here is based on this natural obstacle, the river. It will be necessary to establish a bridgehead beyond this river to be able to continue the operation, and that's the Bug River. Right. So as well here, I want to start with airfield attacks. So we destroyed a bunch of enemy planes once again. I'll leave this as disputed for now, because I actually think that I want to start with a blitz attack from the 3rd Panzer Group. What did they do? They destroyed the Western District's fortified regions. The battle on the border is over, and no major obstacles should stop the Wehrmacht in its progress towards Minsk. Right, let's actually also... let's see though. Because they're isolated and they have exposed flanks. Yeah, let's also assault with the 9th. Destroying the 6th Cavalry. 1 tanks, 2 infantry, 4 cohesion. Let's attack with the 4th Army, which puts the enemy 4th Army with exposed flanks and in a castle. And the castle is of course an encirclement. This army is surrounded by the enemy and cut off from its supplies. If it cannot break through or sneak through enemy lines, it will be eliminated or surrender en masse when it will no longer have the means to defend itself. Let's actually take a look at the log, because it did lose 4 artillery and 4 infantry, so it cannot be very large anymore. So there are a few things which you can do with an isolated unit in order to try and get it back. One of those is reversed front, and let's see here. This action allows your panzers to strike the enemy from behind, with a good chance of surrounding or destroying them. Of course, you need to have pierced your opponent's lines first. Well, we already did that. And they might lose this isolated status. A more safe way to lose isolated status is by doing a defensive withdrawal that will automatically get you out. Other things that we could do is a behind the lines raid and a deep raid. So if we take a look at the wiki here, a behind the lines raid. Units behind enemy lines and takes advantage of it to ravage its rear, disrupt its logistics, destroy or capture its depots, forcing its HQ to move in an emergency. In short, you create havoc. And another thing that you can do is a deep raid. A unit swallows the kilometers and drive as deep as possible into enemy territory. This action is useful to complete operations quickly. In the case of a Kessel type operation, the terrain thus traversed contributes to the closing of pockets. Keep in mind, however, that a unit deep in enemy territory will be difficult to supply. So the thing is that because this is a Kessel type operation, it means that the enemy units will more quickly be encircled. If I do a deep raid, it doesn't cost ammunition, only fuel, but they don't have that much. Let's also just... the thing is, we can only get 3 supplies. And... basically... doesn't really add up because they don't get it. Right, let's also do a breakthrough with the 2nd Panzer, which has killed the 4th Army and gives me another refueling. A lot of progression, by the way, and the 10th Army is now also isolated. It's exposed and is in a castle. So that's pretty decent. Next up will be the south. What actually do we have in reserve in the center? 102nd Security and the 42nd Corps. Alright. The road to Kiev. It is a narrow front that leads to Kiev, guarded by large concentrations of Soviet troops. The surprise factor should, however, allow the Wehrmacht to break through. Let's do another airfield attack. There are more airplanes on the southern front, so we actually destroyed 8 Soviet airplanes. That's pretty good. Let's also go for an air superiority. So we have air superiority now. And we see that there's 4 units that will get supplied. Well, we'll probably be well off trying an assault first. Didn't go very well, actually. Attacking 8th Mechanized. Let's try a breakthrough here. They lost a lot more this time. 29% progress of the operation. Lutsk, Dubno, Rivne, each one of these small towns will be stubbornly defended by the Red Army. It's a lot more progress. That's good. And we have only 1 more left. If we get these guys back, we might wipe out something. But let's actually launch another assault. That gets rid of the Kiev district fortified regions. The ground is now cleared for a final push towards Berdichev and Zhytomyr. And we can actually see here that this also moves forward a bit, like the front lines are advancing like that as well. It's pretty neat. Beyond the Prut, Romania has joined the crusade against the USSR to recover its lost territories of Bessarabia and Bukovina. Crossing of the Prut will mark the first stage of this reconquest. So at the start, we kind of have to say what we're going to do. Are we going to go for a breakthrough or for a general offensive? I haven't really been able to figure out what the difference is, but it seems like general offensive makes the front width much larger. I'm not really sure whether that's what you want to do. I don't know what kind of purpose this has beyond getting the front width higher. So I'm a bit at a loss as to what this means. Let's just go for breakthrough. Now, over here, if we do an airfield attack, which I tried with my first testing phase, you only destroy 2 planes. It's not as important as with the other ones. Let's only go for air superiority. They actually lose more planes with air superiority than if you were to try and destroy the airfields. That's better. And since we don't have that much going on right now anymore, Guess we'll only use an assault with the 11th Army over here. Yeah, that wiped out the 2nd Cavalry. Now that the Axis troops have gained a foothold beyond the Prut, the capture of Kishinev and especially of Mogilev-Podolsky and its railway bridge beyond the Dniester are the next step. 2 infantry losses. I guess it's got wiped out, so Kishinev doesn't matter. That's it for the Romanians. So we can't really do anything anymore. We've used up all the points. Let's go to the next turn. Lietuvos activistų frontas. When our troops entered Kaunas, the city had already been liberated by Lithuanian partisans. The latter seized large deposits of Soviet small arms and began a ferocious purge on their own. Jews, communists, collaborators. Our troops were welcomed as liberators, but the situation in the city is out of control, as killings, lootings, and burnings occur in the streets of the city. The commander, after initial confusion, must react. We can let the Einsatzkommando take over, integrate these partisans in our army, or disarm the madmen and restore order by violence if necessary. So, if we let the Einsatzkommando take over, we pretty much do nothing, so that creates the most barbarism. Integrating them into our army gives us a unit, and disarming them, I believe, is a penalty for us, but we get less barbarism. Let's just get them into our army. The Einsatzkommandos have arrived in town and are taking over the purification process. The partisans are integrated into the Wehrmacht under German command. This decision, taken without the arrangement of High Command, caused some friction. For the Führer, the main thing is that the elimination of the Jews will now continue in a more organized manner. The Army Group Command looks elsewhere or approves of these operations. We get auxiliaries, but +2 barbarity. The Lviv pogrom. As the Red Army evacuates Lviv, the population discovers with horror the extent of the crimes perpetrated by the NKVD. In the minds of the population and of the German troops who have just entered the city, there is no doubt that the Judeo-Bolsheviks should be punished for these crimes. An angry crowd, supervised by the National Ukrainian Militia and soon joined by Einsatzgruppen C, is unleashed against the Jews of the city. The dead are counted in thousands, and their number continues to grow as the Einsatzgruppen take over. It's just the beginning. The ferocity of the militiamen has not escaped Himmler's attention, who intends to organize these men into auxiliary police units. Barbarous +1, and we get a police unit. The 309th. Discipline is lacking in the 309th Police Battalion, whose drunk men have started a pogrom of their own initiative in the town of Białystok. Men of the 309th have spread through the Jewish quarter, raping and killing. Emboldened by her own exactions, the soldiery ended up trapping 700 people in a synagogue, which they set on fire. It took no less than 30 wagons to evacuate the bodies of this bloody bacchanal. Will Johann Pfluchbeil, the commander of the division, tolerate the savagery of his troop? Will the Soviet border is hardly crossed? Look, we must restore order. This is unacceptable. Exemplary sanctions have been taken against the leaders of recent violence outbursts. Shooting Judeo-Bolsheviks, why not? But legally and not while being intoxicated. -1 cohesion, but I don't care about that. Barbarism is +1. Probably more if you choose the other one. Last one, I think. Finland at war. Or is the pre-final one. The German Air Force is constantly raiding for Finnish territory, and General Diethel's Alpine Corps have occupied the Finnish Petsamo mines. Soviet reprisal raids around Helsinki led the Finnish government to declare war on the USSR. Of course, in the president's speech, this is a new Russian aggression, and general mobilization is declared. However, in reality, this war has been prepared for a long time, and the Finnish army already lines up more than 200,000 men along the border. For Finland, the hour of reconquest of territories lost in 1940 has struck. However, official speeches take care to present this war as a war parallel to that waged by Germany. If it looks like an Axis, it acts like an Axis, it probably is one of the Axis forces. It's the continuation war. The Soviets will not be taken by surprise this time. They are in defense and firmly entrenched along the border. Operation Silver Fuchs, or Silver Fox. In the far north, General Dietl has seized the Finnish Petsamo site and its nickel deposits. From here, he could launch an operation to cut the port of Murmansk from the rest of the USSR. This port is ice-free all year round and represents the most practical connection with Great Britain, through which material aid or even English troops could arrive. The OKW has planned 2 joint operations, one along the coast toward the port itself, and another further south to cut the railway line, which connect Murmansk to the southern regions. General Dietl, hero of Narvik, is hostile to this plan. There is only one road towards Murmansk, and it crosses regions so inhospitable that they constitute a formidable natural defense. Whatever, we're just going to launch both of these operations. I'm sure we can take everything. Metal ogres, I was even wrong, there's more. To our dismay, the Soviets have almost invulnerable tanks. These land leviathans sank deep into our lines, without our anti-tank guns being able to even damage them. These monsters could only be mastered by bringing 88mm guns to the front line, but also they quite often ran out of fuel or suffered mechanical damage. The Fuhrer wants the same. What will happen when the Soviets learn to handle these monsters by supporting them with infantry, instead of sending them in small packets and without any coordination into the middle of our lines? Enemy tanks have a chance to be very effective when the quality of troops is at least veteran and the general's level is at least 2. The chances of benefiting from this bonus will increase with each passing week. Oof, okay. Let's quickly take a look what happened in each front, because if we save it and then reload, we can't see that anymore, I think. In the north, they started disputing their superiority. So we lost 1 plane, they lost 4. Then they launched a counterattack against the 18th Army, which trapped their mechanized corps. They lost 3 tanks, 1 infantry, 10 cohesion. They launched another, then they had to restore communications with the 3rd Mechanized. They launched another attack with the 3rd Mechanized. They lost another 3 tanks and 6 cohesion. So if we look at, they're completely gone now. Yeah, they just flat out died. Okay. In the center, they fight for air superiority. They have air superiority now. And they tried to smack us with the 17th Mechanized Corps. Then with the 11th. And then with the 20th. All to no effect. And the 20th is now encircled. And they surrendered, apparently. Yeah, it says here too. 20th Mechanized Corps surrender. Actually, and that's probably the same thing that happened up here. 3rd Mechanized Corps surrender, exactly. In the south, first they went to is disputed, then they went to air superiority. They actually get 6 movements, that's a lot. Then they tried to smack us with the 19th, did nothing except lose tanks. Had to restore communications to the 8th. Tried to smack the 6th Army again. They lost cohesion. Then they tried to smack the 17th again with the 9th. And these guys also got encircled because of those attacks. Which they lost tanks and they lost cohesion. The 19th Mechanized Corps surrendered. The 9th Mechanized Corps surrendered. And also the 22nd Mechanized Corps surrendered as well. So all those that made a counterattack all surrendered. But they still have quite a few up here. They still have 4 Mechanized Corps out there. 4 armies and a cavalry. So it's a lot, actually. Right, anyway, I'm gonna end the video here. Thanks for watching. Take care. See you next time. Bye-bye.